evangelize individuals. It was a place to really put a whole new way of life over a community that, up until that time, didn't really live under those rules or that type of structure. I think that also that's the impact in terms of linking together peoples of the Americas. The reality is that prior to Spain's arrival, there were native communities throughout the Americas, but they were linked in no way. The Incas in South America had no back and forth with the Aztecs. The Aztecs in Mexico City had no contact with the native communities in California. When Spain came and set up these missions, it really allowed these areas to then become independent. Mexico, the mass amount of land that became independent Mexico, didn't exist as a unified area, and also created countries that we have today throughout the Americas. And today, even further, they continue to serve as that community focal point, that the heart of many of these communities today. And it's interesting because the parishioners are so widespread. You have other communities from Europe, whether they're Irish or Italian, that are in the Catholic parish. You have descendants of the Spanish and descendants of the mix of Spanish and the native peoples that go there. You have native communities that, especially their elders, that are and were married and are being buried at these missions today. So, stories, their community stories about the impact of the missions, the role that the missions played, whether good or bad, in their family history, in their community history. And so they're very relevant to keep around, and that's why the California Missions Foundation is dedicated to keeping these buildings standing, because it allows the history and the stories to continue to be passed on and talked about in the future generations.
Junipero Serra was canonized by Pope Francis in 2015, fairly recently. And since there's been pushback against him. He sort of mentioned that there are people who today and then, I'm sure, not like the mission system. Certainly, we believe in original sin, so nothing is perfect. But what do these protesters who a couple of years ago turned violent and tore down a statue of St. Junipero Serra, what do they not understand or misinterpret about him?
I think a lot of this anger directed at Junipero Serra
Hey, Garrett.
is an accumulation of anger at so many things that we have in our world today. Very few statues exist. I can go in my car here in Santa Barbara. I can drive around this town all day. I can drive to the next town an hour away, 30 minutes away. It'll take me forever to find a statue of a human being. In Santa Barbara, we have dolphin statues down at the beach. There's no former presidents, there's no former generals, there's no statues. In the early 1900s, an architect, a very prominent, successful architect in Southern California, came up with the idea to create statues of Junipero Serra and gift them to each mission to put near their entrance. William Hannon spent a lot of money to make these statues, and many people say that the statues actually resemble more William Hannon than they do Junipero Serra. So what's interesting is that as people have taken out aggression and anger on Junipero Serra, they're really slicing off the head of a statue of an architect who didn't do anything wrong in Los Angeles. So I don't feel that if people really got to understand what Junipero Serra did, his separation and his efforts to separate the mission from the Presidio in Monterey. It's a great example. He did it for one reason. He was not happy with the way the soldiers were treating members of the native community there at that mission. So he fought for separation to protect the natives. that system of separation between the Presidio and the missions ended up extending throughout California to other places.